China just told Trump, "You're not welcome yet," not in those words, but when the United States cancels the most important presidential trip in nearly a decade, 9 days before departure, and the Chinese foreign minister responds by saying the U.S. needs to meet us halfway. That is not diplomatic language. That is a verdict. And if you want to understand who actually holds power in this war, the next few minutes will change how you see everything. If you're new here, this channel covers the real story behind the headlines. Subscribe so you don't miss it. It takes 2 seconds, and it means everything. Let's start with what happened, because the facts alone are stunning. Trump and Xi had a summit locked in, March 31st to April 2nd, Beijing. The first time an American president would set foot in China since Trump's own first term in 2017. The first face-to-face since they shook hands in South Korea last October and agreed to a 1-year trade truce that had, by all accounts, actually been working. China was buying American soybeans. The U.S. had paused its blacklist expansion. Beijing had paused rare earth export controls. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had publicly confirmed China was meeting its commitments. Chinese officials were calling 2026 a potential landmark year. The summit was supposed to make it permanent. Then February 28th happened. The U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury. Iran's supreme leader was killed. And within days, the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow channel that carries roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply, was effectively shut down. Iran declared it closed to any vessel linked to the U.S., Israel, or their allies. Brent crude jumped from $73 a barrel to over $100 in 10 days. American gas prices climbed 17% in a matter of weeks. And Trump, heading into a midterm election year with affordability already his biggest political problem, needed help fast. He called on France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, Australia, Spain, and China to send warships to the Strait. Here is what he got back. Germany, this is not our war. France, not until hostilities stop. Japan, the threshold is extremely high. Australia, we are not sending a ship. Spain, intervention risks escalation. Every major ally, every single one, said no. And that is the moment China became the only card left on the table. But Trump didn't ask Beijing quietly. He made it public. In a Financial Times interview on March 15th, he said China gets 90% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz and therefore should help. The message was clear: help first, then we talk. Beijing's response came in 3 parts, and each one was more deliberate than the last. First, China's foreign ministry said head of state diplomacy plays an indispensable role and should not be used as a bargaining chip. Translation: don't threaten us with the summit. Second, state media, which in China does not publish things the government disagrees with, ran an op-ed asking whether Trump wanted China to share responsibility or just the risk of a war Washington started and cannot finish. Third, and this is the part that landed like a punch, China's National Bureau of Statistics put out a statement saying the country's energy supply was relatively strong and that it held 1.2 billion barrels of crude stockpiles onshore, enough to last 3 to 4 months without a single tanker moving through Hormuz. And then analysts pointed out that Trump's 90% figure was wrong. Independent estimates put China's actual exposure to Hormuz at roughly 40 to 50% of seaborne oil imports, which itself accounts for only 6.6% of China's total energy use when domestic production is factored in. Trump had publicly overstated China's vulnerability. Beijing let the numbers do the talking, so Trump canceled the trip. He stood in the Oval Office on St. Patrick's Day and told reporters there were no tricks to it. He said he had a war going on. He needed to stay in Washington. Hours later, Treasury Secretary Bessent went on CNBC and said, unprompted, that the delay was not because Trump had demanded China police the Strait of Hormuz. Think about that. The Treasury Secretary felt he needed to publicly deny a reason the president had already implied multiple times. The White House was contradicting itself in real time. Meanwhile, Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer were in Paris, sitting across the table from senior Chinese officials, trying to lay the groundwork for a rescheduled summit. The talks produced what both sides called a preliminary consensus on some issues. But Greer walked in carrying something Beijing had not appreciated. The Trump administration had launched new Section 301 trade investigations into China and 15 other countries the week before. Why then? because the Supreme Court had just struck down the emergency tariff mechanism Trump had been using to keep triple-digit tariffs in place. The administration needed a new legal path to the same destination. China's Commerce Ministry called the investigations extremely unilateral, arbitrary, and discriminatory. Their trade representative in Paris was direct. These investigations may damage the trade relationship both countries had worked hard to stabilize. That was Beijing's clearest warning yet. But the sharpest move came from Iran. Even as the strait was officially closed to Western shipping, Iran continued sending oil to China. More than 11 million barrels in the first 2 weeks of the war alone, moving through the same waterway that was supposedly shut. And then a senior Iranian official told CNN that Tehran is now considering allowing certain tankers to transit the strait on one condition: the oil must be traded in Chinese yuan, not US dollars. If that arrangement holds, it would be the most direct challenge to the petrodollar system in over 50 years. The global oil market has been priced in dollars since the 1974 agreement between Washington and Riyadh. A yuan-priced oil corridor through the world's most important maritime choke point would not collapse the dollar tomorrow, but it would accelerate a structural shift that Beijing has spent years building toward. China's payment infrastructure is ready. Yuan-denominated trades already exist with Russian crude. Extending that system to Hormuz would create a parallel financial track, one that runs entirely outside the American system. As of Tuesday, March 17th, 3 weeks into this war, Trump had no coalition, no off-ramp, a postponed summit, new tariff investigations angering Beijing, and an Iran that was actively deepening its financial ties with China. He told reporters he looks forward to seeing President Xi, and that Xi looks forward to seeing him. That hedge at the end. That Xi looks forward to seeing him. That is not a confident statement. That is a man hoping the other side still wants to meet. China's foreign minister said the key is for the U.S. to meet them halfway. Halfway. From where Trump currently stands, that is a long walk. The trade truce has 7 months left. The Section 301 investigations are moving toward conclusions that could trigger a new tariff round before that clock runs out. The Strait of Hormuz is still functionally closed, and the yuan oil deal is still on the table. Bessent's own word for the current state of U.S.-China relations was stable. Stable for now. In diplomacy, those 3 words are not comfort. They are a countdown. If this helped you understand what's actually happening, share it. Not for the algorithm. Share it because the people around you are reading headlines about a postponed trip and missing the story underneath it entirely. Who holds the stronger hand right now, Washington or Beijing? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. This situation moves fast, and the next update could be the one that changes everything.